Us for the first time through this season of being the church, we are kind of at our halfway point at this series that we are calling Meant for Good. And throughout this series, we've kind of been just walking through the life of Joseph that we find in the book of Genesis to see how that parallels to not only our life and our walk as believers in Christ Jesus, but also as the body of believers in the church itself. And Joseph's life up to this point really has been this really crazy journey, and I hope that you have been able to see in your own life how this applies into how you live every day, but also how it applies to this body of believers, that we are on this journey throughout the year to move from this place of complacency or this place of stuckness in our faith, if you're feeling that this year, to move to this place of completely and fully, totally committed followers of Jesus Christ. To pursue commitment through the good times and through the bad times. And the question it asks is like, what do we do when it happens to be hard? Or what do we do in the bad times? What do we do when the pressure is on and it feels most intense in our lives? And we're trying to understand that here through the life of Joseph. Now, if you remember back a couple weeks ago, if you're with us, we kind of talked through this idea that there were these promises that Joseph had been given by God through a series of dreams, that one day he would be raised up above his brothers and above his family to rule over them. And that God had a plan and God had a destination for Joseph and his life. And the promises of God in our own lives, as we kind of ran through that, are all leading to this good and final destination, that he is working all things for good. However, with those promises that God gave to Joseph, there would also be this process that Joseph would have to go through. And we would also have to go through it ourselves through this life. And the process really feels like this kind of impossible journey toward this promise. And it generally includes some kind of suffering and some kind of hardship. There are detours that we take in life. And ultimately, we have to live inside of this dichotomy of how the promise and the process are in tension with one another. They can seem to contradict each other at times in our lives. And we've seen that through so many of the trials in the life of Joseph up to this point in time. God is moving toward this perfection, this perfect man, and perfection meaning the fully mature, moving him toward this end result or this end goal of maturity and godly character. God is preparing Joseph, and really he's preparing us as people to be the people he has called us to be. And that's going to bring us back to today and where we are in Joseph's story. We are jumping back into the end of chapter 40 through the book of Genesis, where Joseph is still in prison. Now, he met this cupbearer to advocate for Joseph's release once that cupbearer was going to be restored to Pharaoh's side. And so we ended last week at the end of chapter 40 with a very disappointing note for Joseph. He said, "Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him." And it seems like all of Joseph's kind of hopes and dreams of getting out of prison are now lost. He's got nothing left. See, but there is hope today for us. And it's this moment that happens between chapter 40 and chapter 41 that there's this now turning point in the story. Joseph has exhausted all that he can do by himself. And honestly, that is exactly where God wants him to be and where God needs him to be so that now God can go to work in Joseph's life, right? The procession of Joseph's life is about to begin in such a big way because it goes on to say in chapter 41, when 2 full years had passed, this is after the cupbearer went back, 2 full years passed, Pharaoh had a dream and he was standing by the Nile. Now there's a subtle shift in the dynamic of the story here. I mean, think about everything that has happened up until this point. And more specifically, think about Joseph's interaction with the cupbearer, okay? At the time the cupbearer gets thrown into prison, Joseph has already been in jail for 10 years. He's already been in prison for 10 years. He's now the overseer of the entire operations going on inside of the jail. So now after 10 years of imprisonment, Joseph comes into contact with the chief cupbearer of the Pharaoh, and we see for the first and really the only time, Joseph is now advocating for himself. He sees this opportunity that he's going to get out of prison, and so he's going to try right here to say, "Can you help me out? right? You can almost hear this like desperate plea in Joseph's voice to say, please don't forget me. I've been here for 10 years. Everything's wrong, and I didn't do any of it. It's not my fault. Can you please help me out when you get out of here? God promised me all of these things, and I'm here in jail, right? And if you could just remember me, I'm going to get back on my way where God has told me I should be, right? And he could have easily seen this as his last and really best opportunity to get out of prison. See, but what happens to all of Joseph's efforts here, right? The cupbearer just forgets him. And then another 2 years goes by, and Joseph is still in prison. And the truth of the matter is that this could have been a very, very dark time for Joseph to be in prison these 2 years, right? It seems like at every turn of fate, it's just kind of slipping through his fingertips. Do you think Joseph probably got tired of waiting up to this point? Like, I know I would feel this crushing blow that everything is just lost. I mean, why wasn't 10 years good enough? Why wasn't 10 years enough time? Why did we have to tack on another 2 years to my prison sentence? And to me, it just seems unfathomable. And maybe it just seems just a little bit unfair to Joseph. I've gone through all of this in my life. Why is there more? Why now? This was my break, my chance. And catch that, right? Right? This is why we miss the point as believers. We're so concerned with me. Right? But the truth is that God, who is this omnipotent, omniscient, all-loving person, wouldn't allow suffering without a good reason. There's always a why, even if we don't get to see it all or know it all. Right? Suffering actually has a purpose if we understand Joseph's story right here. If we understand the moment of God in our own and the movement of God in our own story. And this may be one of the most difficult things that we have to accept within the Christian walk. It may be even be the most contested point in our thought life where we battle with our own thoughts as why everything is happening to us and to me and what's going on in my life. But when you look at the life of Joseph, God has a purpose for allowing these last 2 years of imprisonment for Joseph. I mean, on the face of it, if you look at another 2 years that pass, it really just seems cruel, right? Why is Joseph still in there? But maybe this was the final blow to Joseph's self-sufficiency to say, you know what, I can handle this. I can do it on my own. And he watches his one last attempt to deliver himself. It all goes up in flames. And maybe this was the moment where Joseph said in his heart, you know what, whether you leave me here in this pit and you leave me in this jail for the rest of my life or you get me out of here, I will bless the name of the Lord. Maybe this was that moment, this time that it was happening. In reality is we don't get to see the behind-the-scenes footage of what's going on inside Joseph's heart and in his mind, right? We don't see that in the text, right? We don't see that maybe he's pleading with God, can you please get me out of here? Maybe he's begging for some fairness in his life, crying out to God for something just to happen, or doing whatever it takes just to come to terms with the life that he has now. But because we can see the whole story of the book of Genesis, we can see it all unfold right here before us. We see that in the midst of this struggle, God has done more than good reasons for letting this happen to Joseph and what is going on right now. There are more than good reasons. He has the best reasons to let this continue because it's for God's maximum glory at the end. And it's also for Joseph's maximum benefit to the world. See, God is fulfilling his promise to Joseph right here in these 2 years. He's revealing his mighty hand, kind of weaving this story together, preparing a rescue for his chosen people from the coming destruction that is coming on the horizon. And he is crafting this story that we can share and that we can understand and we can learn from for millennia that have passed, right? All for the glory of God and for Joseph's benefit, so that we might understand and benefit from it. I mean, have you ever actually gotten tired of waiting? Seems a bit on the nose today, right? As a church, we've been in this season of waiting for years to know what to do and where to go, only to turn around the corner and to see like there's no end in sight for us to do anything. I mean, have you been there in your life, in your personal life, not even like in the life of the church? Because I have, right? I keep pushing forward against the tide, against the school of fish coming at me, right? Only to get to the end, and there's no end to the struggle, and there's no end to the pain. Having all of your attempts to remove whatever the boulder is in your path, only to be met with this epic failure, kind of one after another in your life. All of your attempts to move forward kind of just fall flat right in front of you. Could it be, though, that the end of your own striving is the beginning of God's thriving in your life? Right? Maybe he's taking you to this tomb where the only escape is through this divine resurrection. Because guess what? He's the deliverer, not you. The prophet Isaiah, he put it this way once. He said, "Therefore the Lord waits to be gracious to you. And therefore he exalts himself to show mercy to you. For the Lord is a God of justice, and blessed are all those who wait for him." See, the truth is we have to wait today. We have to kind of face this world that we don't get to see the full picture. And God's waiting and waiting and waiting until the day and the hour and the second when he exalts himself to become your salvation, obliterating any remnant of this notion that we can save ourselves. Therefore, the Lord waits in his timing alone. Now, personally, me as a person, I tend to have these really big kind of dreams in my mind. I can see the result of how I want something to look and to feel in my mind. And so a number of years ago, I took on this project that would just change the landscape of a community. And in my mind, it was the best thing that could happen. It would be better than anybody could have ever imagined. And every step along the way was met with resistance. Just one problem after another. And the harder I pushed for it and the harder I tried to make it happen, the worse the resistance became. Until one day it just all fell apart. My dreams and what I thought were being denied at that time. And when I reflect back on all that had happened and all that went down, God was doing something in my heart at the time. I realized that I was doing it all for myself. That I would be the one to change the future. That I would do it with my own bare hands. And the truth is, I can't win them all. I can't do it by myself. And I can't just keep pushing what I want without following what God would have me do first. And that's where we find Joseph right here. He's at the end of his rope now. One last ditch effort has now failed to save him. And now 2 more years of waiting. At the end of himself, God begins to now pull him out of the depths. And now he starts to put Joseph on display for the world to see this movement of God through one man. And so chapter 41 opens and we see God moving through the Pharaoh, an Egyptian who has these 2 dreams. And the first dream is that there's these 7 healthy cows and they're eaten by these 7 sickly cows, which is a weird image by itself to kind of just like look in your mind. But then the second dream is about 7 healthy ears of corn devoured by these 7 diseased ears of corn. And so Pharaoh wakes up and he's startled by these dreams and he's troubled by what's happening. He doesn't understand them. So he summons all of these wise men and these magical people that they have in Egypt, and he summons them to tell Pharaoh what the dreams mean, but no one in his realm can give an interpretation to the dream, while Joseph is just sitting in prison waiting. Right? God is setting up these events that will lead not only to Joseph's release, but to so much more than that. Because in the flip of a switch, Joseph is about to become the second most powerful man in Egypt. Because the heart of Pharaoh is being prepared in these 2 years to receive a rescue from the living God through Joseph. You see, all of the struggle was meant for something. And God is just weaving it together here. Weaving it together so perfectly. You see, Pharaoh first goes to all his own people and all their own gods. And all of his advisors failed to interpret this dream. And isn't that the way with us too, right? We've got to fail on our own first. We got to, I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to get out there and I'm going to make it happen. All the things that we hold dear, these false gods in our lives need to fail so that now we are ready to receive the living God to save us. Whether that's, money or success or the technology we love so deeply, right? I almost had that crisis today, right? And even other people we hold on to and think they're going to save us. The glory at the end of the story belongs to only one person, and guess what? God won't be replaced by anything else, right? See, mine has always been independence and success, right? That's my struggle. to make it on my own, to stand on my own 2 feet for myself, to build. That's how I built my business. So, I had these long days, and I would travel far, and I would do all the work by myself, all by the strength of my own back and the constant movement of what I could do. And when I needed it the most, it literally fell apart at my feet, literally crumbled underneath of me, and I threw it all in dumpsters when it was over. Because the glory and success in my life belongs to only one person. And it took that failure for him to show me the way forward. Our lives are for his glory. And Joseph had to learn that too, right? After an extra 2 full years in prison, he was ready to see what only God could do in his life, to pull Joseph out of the shadows of what his life had become to what he had promised him. And the author of Genesis says that all of Pharaoh's advisors had failed him. And then all of a sudden, here comes this chief cupbearer out of nowhere and says, hey, you know what? I remember this guy. He's in prison right now, and he interpreted my dreams. He's pretty good. So then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph to himself, and he quickly brought him out of the pit. And when he had shaved himself and he changed his clothes, because he's probably filthy at this point, right? He came before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream. And there's no one who can interpret it. I've heard it said that you hear a dream and you can interpret it. Joseph answered Pharaoh. He said, it's not me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Now think about what's going on kind of in this text right here. Pharaoh, the king of this land and this empire, with all of his power, now calls Joseph forward and says, hey, I heard that you, Joseph, can interpret the dreams. Now think of the temptation for Joseph. You can just say it just as a man, right? Like, this is the temptation right here to say, you know what, I could do that. Right, to exalt himself above, to make himself kind of worthy of being set free from prison. The stakes are about as high as stakes can be in this round. But what does Joseph say here? The first words out of his mouth is, it's not me. It's not me. What kind of man stands in front of the king of the known world and contradicts what he says in his first breath to answer? What kind of man stands with this boldness and this faith in front of the ruler that holds his whole delicate life and his destiny in the palm of his hand? It's the kind of man who has been perfected by God's process, who has held on to God's promise in the darkness of this pit. From the betrayal from his brothers to this years of slavery, to false accusation in his life, to decade-plus imprisonment. All of the years of injustice and torment have forged a man with nothing to lose, but only God to gain. It's not me, Joseph says. I'm nothing. I have nothing except this God who's never left me. Through all the adversity, God is weaving together this masterpiece. And on the other side of the struggle here, the procession of Joseph's life is now beginning. The great unveiling of glory. And Joseph gives it straight to God. It's not me. God will give you, Pharaoh, a favorable answer. The process is painful. Years and years and years of waiting. God's perfection is costly beyond belief. To lose everything that we once held dear. But there's a procession at the other end of it. To take the language from Paul in one of his epistles to say, thanks be to God who in Christ always leads us in triumphal procession and through us spreads the fragrance of his knowledge of him everywhere. Right? And the idea of this triumphal procession, it comes from the ancient Roman warriors who went off to battle. They would come home to Rome, and they would have this victory parade to march through the streets with all of their ranks in file, with their prisoners and all of their spoils, and they would burn incense in the streets to the sound of cheering for the warriors coming home, and there would be music. Sounds kind of familiar if you roll back to a sports team that won something and came home. right? When they won the championship, we've crowded the streets to cheer them on for all the great things they had done. Now take that imagery and apply that to Joseph's life. God's about to make a show of Joseph here. He's about to unveil the beautiful result of this painful process that Joseph has gone through. And so Pharaoh recounts these dreams to Joseph, and Joseph, full of the Spirit of God, interprets these dreams to say 7 years of plenty is coming. We're going to have all the food that we can ever have in our lives. And then it's going to be followed by 7 years of this horrible famine. But Joseph doesn't just stop with an interpretation. He now proceeds to give a solution to the problem. And so Joseph says, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh proceed to appoint overseers over the land and take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt during the 7 plentiful years. And let them gather all of the food of these good years. And then store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh for food in the cities. And let them keep it. Let them hang on to it. The food is going to be a reserve for the land against the 7 years of famine that are going to occur in this land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish through the famine. Joseph gives the plan of attack here. And Pharaoh finds this a very pleasing solution to the coming trouble that they're going to have. And what I find interesting in this is that with all the power and the advisors that the Pharaoh has at his disposal, Pharaoh has now been prepared to receive help, not only from an outsider who's a Hebrew, which is like, not a great thing at the time, but he was also a slave and he was also a convict. This is unheard of at the time, but this is only what God can do in the midst of it all. We also see this change in Joseph as he's proposing the solution. It's very easy for Joseph to say, you know what, I can do that for you if you don't mind. I can help. Joseph doesn't put himself forward as a solution to the problem. And what's fascinating, and part of this puzzle, if we can actually grasp it, it's a very humbling moment if you really read into it. Joseph doesn't say, hey, I'm your guy. Let me do it. He says, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man. And when you look at the totality of Joseph's life and this story, do you think Joseph didn't think he was the ideal man for this job? Do you think he didn't think that he had the necessary skills to handle this? I mean, look at Joseph's track record. When Joseph has been put in charge of something, whether that be Potiphar's household or the jail, the boss doesn't have to be concerned with anything at all. The boss just goes to sleep and lets Joseph run it. He ran Potiphar's house to great wealth. He ran the jail to wonderful efficiency. Joseph has been given this gift of turning chaos into order and causing everything in whatever it is in his domain to thrive. He was made for this job, but he doesn't put his name forward. He exhibits this restraint now, this humility, and he leaves his destiny in the hands of his God. Right? The temptation is always to think of ourselves more highly than we should. To believe that we're somehow at the mercy of humans and economies and companies and really even societies. See, but we're not in the hands of men in this world. We as believers of the living God are in the hands of the Almighty. And what that means for us is that we can cease this striving for positions, for what the world wants us to do. I mean, we work hard. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to work hard, but we don't strive for it. Striving is thinking kind of highly of ourselves, and it comes, thinking that I need to be in control of whatever the outcome is. I need to be in control of what's going to happen in my life. See, but rest and peace and provision, they come from this trusting in God, and it builds off this idea of holy resignation that we talked about last week, waiting on God to move. We'll take the need out of striving in our lives. And it's going to give us the strength to kind of hold back and wait for God and trust him to handle the process for us. When we humble ourselves under the mighty hand of God, at the proper time, he's going to raise us up where he needs us to be. I mean, do you believe that our times are in his hands? Do you believe he cares for you and he sees you and has a plan to raise you up from whatever the struggle you are facing today? Do you really want to strive to attain things outside of his provision? And sometimes the hardest and really the best work is just kind of stepping back and being quiet, just as an act of faith. I mean, Joseph waited and waited, years of process and perfecting, all leading to this moment in his life. I mean, listen to the turning point right now in Joseph's life. The proposal pleased Pharaoh and all of his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find a man like this, in whom is the Spirit of God?" Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, "Since God has shown you all of this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards to the throne will I be greater than you." They're basically equal, right? And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "See, I have set you over all of the land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took a signet ring, which was this really fancy ring, was flat. He put his seal on it, right? From his hand, and he put it on Joseph's hand. And he clothed him in garments of fine linen and put gold chains around his neck. And he made him ride in his second chariot. And then he called out before the people of Egypt. He said, "Bow the knee. Bow the knee." Thus he set him over the land of Egypt. After this procession, Pharaoh gives Joseph a new name. He gives him a high-ranking wife and everything he might need to accomplish the mission to reform the kingdom and prepare for the famine that is about to come to Egypt. And Joseph rules Pharaoh's affair with just excellence. He prepares them greatly for what is coming. He has children. He forgets his sorrows and all his experiences of his life, and now he is living in fruitfulness. And at the end of the chapter, the famine strikes Egypt, and Joseph just opens the storehouses and says, "Yeah, we're ready for that." He starts to sell the grain to all the land and to the survival of everybody. This is the procession at the end of the process. Now is the proper time for God to raise up his servant. And what God has done in the secret heart of Joseph, he now puts on display for the world to see. This is the unveiling of a form of beauty that only comes from the trials and the struggles that have forged who Joseph was through all the pain in the process. No longer putting himself forward to be the guy to handle everything. This is God showing the world his own power and his own glory. I mean, picture if you can what's happening here. Here's this Hebrew slave, this convict who is in prison in this wave of God's providence. Right? He's now taken to these impossible heights that no one ever thought, solely by the grace of God. This is the same providence that gave Joseph his dreams at the very beginning of the story, that he would one day be exalted. And it caused so much problems within his family. This is the same providence that conducted him all the way to Egypt to become a slave. And the same providence that held him inside of prison, waiting and waiting and waiting for 12 years. This is the current of the same holy river that surrounds your life, and it surrounds my life. And it holds us here for a time, and it conducts us over there for a time, only one day to push us upward and outward into this waterfall of God's glory over our lives. I mean, who is like God, who put this jailed, dirty foreigner who needed a shave and he needed new clothes, who's a slave and a convict, into the king's chariot, his second chariot, and to make everybody else bow down to him? Who is like God, who makes this pagan Pharaoh exalt the name and the wisdom of Yahweh in this moment? And the reality for us today is that Joseph's procession is also our procession. The promises of God continue to hold true for our lives as they did for Joseph. Joseph's story is our story. It's the story of the life of Christ in your life. God will fulfill his promise to his people. He will raise up those who humbly bow before him. And if I could give you any kind of assurance today that your life isn't only the painful process, there will also be a procession and the exaltation and the glorification of God in your life. God is working through the adversities that we face. He's working behind the scenes until the proper time comes forward for us. And then when that moment arrives, he's going to show off his handiwork that he has created in you. And the truth of all of this is that it's something that we need to wrestle with within our own lives through the life of Joseph. Is that it's about the power of God at work and not ours. It's not about you. And that's the best news of all. It's not about you. Jesus said it best in John's account in the gospel. He said, "By this, my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples, to my Father's glory." See, God's the greatest farmer who ever was and whoever is and whoever will be. He's cultivating the fruit in our life with this relentless dedication on the good days and the bad days and the days of devastation that are in our lives. There are days when we don't feel all these glorious things are true and we don't feel like these are happening, especially when we feel like everything we ever knew is literally crumbling at our feet. Feelings have a purpose, but they're not meant to be the compass toward glory. Glory, by God's grace, is the compass to our feelings. I mean, look at the procession of Joseph. God worked through the pain and he worked through the hardship, and all the hurt was meant for good in the life of Joseph. And the same holds true for each and every one of us today. God has tied up his glory to the glorification of his humble servants. Our lives, our struggles, our process is a reflection of the power of God inside of our lives. And it's all leading to this procession of God revealing himself through our humility. If you are a disciple, you will bear his fruit. And if you bear his fruit, you will bring him glory. And none of this can happen without his promise and his process and his perfection, all of which has been given freely to each of us. This is why we live and breathe, to bring glory to the glorious one. And there's no greater calling in our lives. There's no greater joy in our lives. This is the pinnacle of all creation, your joyful participation in the glory of God, whatever that might be. Your life is a vehicle where the roads are hard and the roads are bumpy, where we get a flat tire and we're stuck on the side of the road, or we fall asleep behind the wheel and we end up hitting something. But your participation in the glory of God is the destination. That's why Jesus came to save each and every one of us, so that we might share in his glory as his children. And guess what? It was all meant for good, for all of us. Would you pray with me this morning? God, we thank you that through the process, through the pain, through the struggle, through the unknown, through all of the things that we don't know are going on in our lives, you are in control. And that you are working behind the scenes to the point where we get to the end of ourselves and say, you know what, I need you, God. Because you're the only one who could do it. Waiting for you. My soul waits for you, God. So we offer the rest of our time to you. We give you all the praise and all the glory. It's in your name.